It has been a while since I've been able to say this, but sometimes I really love being wrong. Loki, Episode 6, Season Finale. Because, yes, we have confirmed Season 2 is happening. So, spoilers pretty much right off the bat. I should tell you that. If you haven't watched the episode yet, I liked it a lot. And that's all I'm going to say. We're doing spoilers because the episode dives into spoilers pretty immediately. Now, if you go back to my earlier reviews in this, I've said a number of times that it seems super obvious that they are setting up Kang the Conqueror to be the big bad of this. And for that reason, well, not only for that reason, but for that reason amongst a few others, I was really hoping that would not be the case. The other reasons why I didn't want that to be the case include the fact that I don't think Kang is a very interesting character. And I was very much afraid of a repeat of the whole Agatha Harkness thing where they just reveal someone and have it be like, dun dun dun, and like, but we have no context for who this is. Who cares? Because, like, I'm sorry. All respect to Catherine Hahn. The Agatha Harkness thing did not work in WandaVision at all. And yet, when they revealed Kang, and I knew it was him because the doors open and there's Jonathan Majors, and I watched Lovecraft Country, so I recognize him, and I already knew he'd been cast as Kang for the upcoming third Ant-Man movie, so immediately I went, oh, crap. And then he started talking. I was like, okay. All right. This iteration of Kang, I love. Now, some of this is the writing, but some of it, or a lot of it, honestly, is what Jonathan Majors is bringing to the part. This much more casual sense. This sort of like, yeah, no, I know what's going on. What you going to do about it? Like, it's devoid of all of the, I am the conqueror, you will bow before me, I am all-powerful nonsense that you associate with a character like Kang.
Kang does not give up, primitive.
Like, that's so boring. He is not. He's not boring. Like, and here's another thing I don't get to talk about very often. Exposition scenes, especially long ones that have to explain a crap ton of things where not a lot of action or stuff actively moving the plot forward really happens, they tend to get derided a lot. And that's fair. They usually suck and grind the story to a halt and provide information that probably could have been done more organically without stopping the actual inertia of the story. But you know, I'm actually a real big sucker for a good exposition scene. It wasn't uncommon for me in my younger years, like, to really just soak in and want to deliver, you know, the actor in me wanting to deliver the lines for good exposition explanations. I used to watch scenes in movies where, you know, the scientist character, that somebody would explain how it works, like, and I'd just be like, oh, they're good and they're rapid fire. They make what should be boring fun. And this makes what on paper should be boring fun. And this is a really interesting thing for me to break down because so many reasons this should not work. And look, if it didn't work for you, I'm not going to say you're wrong. But for me, and what bugs me, and the kinds of things that drive me nuts, this should have fallen down so hard, and it doesn't. How does this work when normally a nearly episode-long exposition should not work, especially as a finale? And where the reveal of a character in command of everything who is someone we have never seen before within the context of this show and who has no meaning if you don't know the outside material, that should not work. But it does. Why? Couple of things. First is, one of the big fall downs for the Agatha Harkness reveal, yes, I'm going to keep harping on that, suck it up, was the fact that we weren't really in need of a mastermind. What we were needing in WandaVision was an explanation for Wanda herself. Why is she doing this? Why doesn't she appreciate the damage that she's doing by doing this? How is that going to resolve? None of that. And that was like, especially at that point, what the show was hinging itself on. And none of that requires a villain. And in fact, I found a villain to be detrimental to that. So when she reveals herself, it's like, not only was I going, who the heck are you? I was going, why are you even here? We don't need you. But here, we have been building very steadily towards figuring out who is manipulating this. So it's not like, ooh, and I'm behind it all, when there is no need for somebody to be behind it all. Here, they've been deliberately on that path. So inserting the big person who's controlling everything is actually a payoff to what has come before, where it flatly was not in WandaVision. It just happened and didn't gel. Here it does, because they built towards it. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, well, the other two things, is that one, the information we get from him is not just reiterating stuff that we could have already figured out. It's explaining the specific rules of how we got here and what's been going on, things that I did not assume correctly up to this point. And on top of that, between how he interacts with Loki and Sylvie, how they react to him, even though it's mostly conversation, does still move the plot forward and still reveal these characters. Now, that's not to say that Sylvie or Loki was undercharacterized or we didn't know what they were about up to this point, and now suddenly we do. No, of course, we're getting a very good sense of them. But a really good way to solidify characters is to put them under pressure. When the chips are truly down, what do? Are they in agreement? Are they in conflict? And watching that play out was really rewarding. So this is the kind of thing, like, again, on paper, what this episode is doing is the kind of thing that I would say nearly any show, don't do that. But not because it's impossible to do right, but it's because you have to nail every element of it. And if you don't, then it won't work. And this, again, for me at least, nailed every part it needed to nail. The character delivering the exposition is fun to listen to. The explanations he's giving are consistent with what we already know, yet are also providing us new information. The way that characters interact with this information is not designed in a way to simply keep the conversation going, but instead reveals things about them and their priorities. The fact that, to highlight a single moment, Loki going, so this was all a manipulation, and Kang, who doesn't actually even get named in this, but I'm just going to call him that anyway, because that's who he is, looks at him and goes, see, it's really interesting that that's your first assumption. Exactly, because the way that this could have played out that would have been painful would have been Kang starts to explain what's going on, hits a stopping point, and then basically to remind us and that there are other people in the scene and have it not be completely a monologue, you have Sophie or Loki basically prompt him for the next piece of information. And it just keeps the conversation going in a completely functional robotic sense. And this doesn't do that. It keeps the conversation going, yes, but by having Loki and Sylvie give responses and reactions that make sense and, again, build towards how they are going to differ in their reaction when it really comes down to it at the end. This is really good. This made me so like, the more I think about it, the more I like it. Okay, so I also said I like a lot of the ideas that we get and a lot of the clarifications about how this has been working up to this point already. And that's the other thing. It could have been the other thing that really could have pulled this apart is if it's like, ooh, here's what's actually going on, and like it doesn't gel with what we knew before, or it just like, why is that better or have to be different from what we thought was going on? And I even had that thought at a couple of points where I was like, okay, I get all this, but why the fake timekeepers? Why couldn't you just be, hey, I'm in charge around here? And we don't directly get an answer to that, but we get enough things in here that allows me to headcanon something that I like, which is that this is just how this guy operates, and he's the only one left in charge. This is what he's going to do. And or, having seen as much of the possibilities as he's seen, he's determined that for whatever reason, and it's probably not worth delving into, things are going to flow better if he has figureheads. So either one of those works, and there's enough stuff put in here that I can slot that in and make sense and answers a question that otherwise was going to bug the heck out of me. But I love the idea that this multiversal war, which was a concept introduced in the very first episode of this show, isn't actually about the different universes being unable to coexist. It's about this one frickin' guy. So it's not a dead set determination that all these different universes can't work together or be in harmony. It's that this one guy, this one jerk, has versions of himself who won't get along and will insist on trying to conquer or overcome or be in charge or eliminate the rest. I kind of love that. I kind of love that the entire reason that a multiverse is a danger is because of the infinite number of variants of this one guy. That should annoy me, because normally I don't like characters as singular entities being that important. But the thing is, he's not really important in the grand scale in terms of like the universe revolves around him. It's just he's always a problem. However you slice it. Even if a particular incarnation of him isn't a problem, as soon as he starts encountering other incarnations, he's going to become a problem. I really like that. It's just mind-bendy enough that I'm like, oh. And also, it gives us the catharsis of getting to see Sylvie kill him and him saying, I'll see you soon, or whatever his exact line was. Basically saying, look, you thought this version of me was bad? You've just unleashed a whole bunch of worse versions of me. That is because when we saw him, I'm like, well, we're not going to be able to get resolution on this because we know he's showing up again later in Ant-Man 3. But it's not going to be this version of him. It's going to be a different version of him, which is going to, first of all, free things up continuity-wise. Second of all, it doesn't rob us of some degree of closure, some degree of catharsis in dealing with him here, and yet also knowing, oh, this may have set off something way worse. I don't care about Kang. I've never cared about Kang. I think Kang's boring. I love this. I love how this works. I love how he talks. I love his interactions. I love the giddiness when they pass the threshold and he's like, I don't actually know what's going to happen from here on out. I love his admitting to a certain degree of deception up to that point so that if you have the need to poke holes in what he said in order to have it make more sense in your head, you can do that because we already know he lied about certain things. Maybe he was lying about other things. Maybe those will or won't get filled in later. But I like being given an explanation that for me, fits, but also has the wiggle room that if you need to adjust certain parts of this so it makes sense in your head, you can do that because he's already been shown to be a liar, at least in part. I really like this, and I like this guy. I never thought I'd say that about Kang. That's bonkers to me. Now, I've spent pretty much the whole time talking about him and not talking about our other characters. So, Sylvie and Loki. Watching the two of them start to diverge in how they think this should be dealt with was really well done. Because that could have felt very manufactured. That could have felt very forced by circumstance. That the story basically needs them to disagree. So they just will. Because, well, that's what we need to have happen to do the ending we want to do. But it feels properly motivated by character. And again, Loki has a line that makes that clear. You can't trust anyone, and I can't be trusted. This is why we are coming to different conclusions. This is why we can't agree on the best way to deal with this. And you could argue that that's dumbing it down and saying it plainly to an audience that should have been trusted to get it. And like, I'm not going to say that you're wrong, but I kind of appreciated that being said because it shows to me that the writers and the actors understand this. Because one of the risks you run sometimes when you don't lay this stuff out plainly is I'm left here going, did you actually know what you were doing or did you stumble into doing the right thing by accident? And that made it clear, like, no, they knew what they were doing. And I like that as a reassurance sometimes. And also, like, can I talk about how stupidly smoothly this is going to leap into Ant-Man 3 and the Multiverse of Madness and stuff like that? Because look, one of the things I had assumed going into these Disney Plus shows was that they can only matter so much because Marvel has been very smart about not actually making understanding their franchises as interdependent as it seems. You feel like you have to see all of them to keep up with what's going on. And really, if you're watching the Avengers films, the team-up movies, you do to the extent of that way you'll know who everybody is. But as far as following the individual franchises, no, you don't really need to. There's only a couple times that knowledge in one franchise was super dependent on information about what happened in earlier ones. Like Thor Ragnarok has a certain amount of dependence that you saw the Avengers. That's there. But the first two Thor movies, other than a couple of scant references, pretty self-contained. You don't really, and what little information you need to know about what happened in between them gets delivered. All three Iron Man movies, same thing. All three Captain America movies, honestly, are shockingly self-contained. And really the only thing you're left going is like, okay, there's definitely some new people in play, but you figure out who they are in this situation so you can still move forward. The entire MCU is far less interdependent than you think it is. And my assumption going into these shows was that, I was seeing fans build up like, these are going to tie in so much more to the movies than, say, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or definitely the Netflix stuff did. And while I kind of thought, well, they'll tie in more, but they won't tie in that much because they can't. Well, they managed to tie them in more without breaking that rule of, well, you won't understand the movies unless you see the TV shows. Because honestly, that would have been a very stupid thing for Marvel to do, is to make understanding the TV shows dependent on the movies. Other way around. To make understanding the movies dependent on the TV shows. Because, look, raw numbers, fewer people are going to watch all these shows than go to the movies. That's just what happens. So you can't make understanding the movie dependent on the show. And yet they're finding a way where the films are going to leap directly off of things done in the shows, but it's still going to work self-contained. I pointed this out already with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So that whole show was about Sam becoming sure enough in himself that he felt like he actually deserved to carry the shield. But if you skip that and you just watch the movie, if you go from an Endgame where he's given the shield to Captain America 4, where we will see Sam being Captain America, you'll just make the leap that somewhere in between, he got comfortable with it, he's good in this role. And you don't have to actually watch the series where that happened. It's a safe assumption to make. And with this does set up, in a very direct way, the Multiverse of Madness, Doctor Strange movie that we're going to be getting. And also, possibly, Spider-Man No Way Home. We'll know a little bit more about that later, but also potentially that as well. While at the same time, not being necessary to follow those. Because going into those movies, all they have to do is say, oh goodness, there's a multiverse. But only in Loki did they establish the rule of, well, there can't be a multiverse. There can only truly be one timeline at any given time. It got hinted at in Endgame, but like here, with the TV and everything, there must be only one timeline. And then by the end, they break it. So if you skipped Loki, you're just existing in a world where, okay, there's multi-branches and there's a multiverse. Now, if you watched Loki, you sat up and watched that all play out. But going into these other films that are going to have multiversal aspects, like that'll just be the way it is going in. The balance of interconnecting these things and yet not making it 100% dependent. Like, again, you'll understand better if you follow everything, but like, you truly do not have to. You can like ask a friend, hey, what happened in this? Oh, well, there's a multiverse now. Okay, cool. That's like, and I'm pretty sure the movies that are going to be dependent on the multiverse are going to establish that in their own way anyways. I keep waiting for this whole thing to collapse in on itself as they build it up and keep moving forward and it gets more complicated. And it just isn't happening. Like, it still might eventually, but holy cow. God, what the heck else do I have to say? Mobius's confrontation with Ravonna, liked that. So she's still around. I'll be curious to see where they go with her. We've got now this situation where the TVA is definitely still around, but they seem to have a different remit. And now we've got, it looks like, a version of Kang who is more directly in control and isn't using the timekeeper lie. So it's like, oh crap. Are we now immediately dealing with the worst version of the guy we just met? Possibly. Is the TVA's whole remit and how they operate, is it the same? Is it different? It seems to be slightly altered. And we're now looking at a situation where the timeline within the TVA itself appears to have been changed because Mobius doesn't recognize Loki. Because up to this point, I think the assumption, or at least my assumption, was that the TVA is kind of immune to branching timelines. It's like in its own bubble. You know, these variants in these timelines, these things happen, we get rid of it, and the main timeline continues. But no matter what we do, like within our little bubble, we're not affected by any of this. But now they have been. Which, first of all, is a solid indicator of how much things just got shaken up. But also, that's a decent hook going into the second season. I do think it's a little bit risky having Mobius not recognize Loki because I would hate to see them have to sink a bunch of time into reestablishing that relationship when it was already built up really well. We'll see what happens with that with the next season happening next year. But again, we get some closure. We get some catharsis. We get a sense of the end of a chapter, at least, with this season, while still setting up what could come next. Not only here, but in Ant-Man, in the Multiverse of Madness, again, possibly the next Spider-Man. This does so much and is juggling so much and has to thread so many needles. How did it pull it off? I don't know. But I've been saying up to this point that I've been liking this show, but I was going to be nervous until after the finale because so much was going to hinge on this. At this point, with this finale, I can safely say I love it. I love Loki, the series, and it is my favorite of the Disney Plus shows so far. It's going to be tough to top. It's also going to be tough to pick up on a second season and do it as well as this, so I'll be nervous again. But for right now, I love this. This is gold. What did you think of the Loki season finale? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. Why am I counting down this way? I don't know. I'm just rolling with it. I have a Patreon. That is my living. If you want to help me do this and also get rewards for doing so, you can check that out. Plus, there's YouTube memberships which have their own rewards. But you don't have to do any of that. Because at the end of the day, you're the council. I just run the meetings. You've got free will. I don't know everything that's going to happen. And until next time, this council is adjourned.